start hunting early and start by looking at a few candidates. And I'd say, honestly, the best way to, from what I've seen, to kind of tell who's, really on top of their stuff is sounds like it's going to sound like I'm talking about us, but we do a good job of this, but so do a lot of other people. But that's the free information that they dispense, that's how that's one common trend that I've noticed among a lot of the good qualified coaches that are out there. And there's quite a few, but again, like, start doing your research early so that it's not a rush decision. It's not, someone that you went with because it's like the current cool and trendy thing. It's like, I think picking a coach, I know for me, when I decided to pick a coach, it was about a 4-month process back in 2008. And there was a lot of back and forth, and I changed my mind a bunch of times, but it wasn't rushed. And at the time, looking back, it's like, hey, I made a pretty good decision. So a lot of these things that we're talking about now is like, it's like, hey, it helps to have guidance. So I'd say just a year before that, it's like really start like zoning in on who you would like to lead you through this experience. Because it is very important, because it is, it's not a high impact sport. It's not a contact sport by any means, but man, does it mess a lot of people up, Mm-hmm. It's a lot of responsibility behind being a contest prep coach. And unfortunately, there's a lot of not so good ones out there. So I think that's a huge one, is like starting to kind of plant a seed in regards to like who you're going to let handle this. Don't do your first prep on your own. That's definitely a one that I had to learn the hard way.
When you do go start hunting for that coach, I think the last thing you want to do is be on doing extremes when you come to the coach, because that just takes away tools that we can use. Like, you'd be surprised sometimes how the surface things look great. Competition prep athlete, they've got good physique, outlines of all their muscles, not stage ready, but maybe they're 8, 10 pounds out, so pretty darn close. But then you start scrubbing away those layers on top, start looking underneath, and they're doing 7 days a week of cardio, hour and a half a day. Their calories are allowed 1,100, 900, something like that. And here you're presented with this file of, okay, I got 10 weeks to go. Here's my setup. And, we got 10 pounds to lose. That is sometimes like even worse than the prepper that comes to us that's got 12 weeks and 20 pounds to lose, Sometimes that 20 pounds to lose, at least the weight that's going to come off is pretty darn healthy, So yeah, when you do start hunting for those coaches, make sure that you're in a reasonable place, maybe doing a little bit of cardio, maybe doing that bike ride like Jeff did just before the podcast here, like once a week, maybe not none, maybe not zero, but I mean, I would prefer zero than to doing 12 hours a week. You know what I mean? Not super, super high volume training to where you're pushing like 30, 40 sets on things, but at the same time, probably not the other end of the spectrum to where you're doing one heavy, main compound movement once a day, every day, something like that. So that you've got a reasonable approach. And then we've got more tools. We can start adding in cardio when we need to. We can take away some calories if we need to. We can actually run some periodized blocks of training where, okay, maybe we do want to take volume up a little bit more or down a little bit, what have you. But you've got some leeway for that coach to be able to have tools available to them to manipulate.
Anything to add, Jeff, to that?
No, I was trying to think of other things. I was kind of like in a deep thought right now, but I was kind of just in a nutshell thinking like, man, a lot of the theme is timeline, just giving time, because it just broadens the playbook, and especially if someone's coming to us with little experience. It's sometimes like, even let's say if you're planning to compete within a calendar year, sometimes that has to be extended out to the following year. Like, you might need more than a year to set things up, to learn more about training, to learn more about diet, to learn more about yourself, to learn more about the coach you're working with. And it takes, like, this sport is not it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And I think sometimes, like, it's just looking at timelines. Sometimes, again, you have to extend things out because it does take time to learn a lot of these things. And I think a lot of people, they're always in a rush. Like, they're not patient, whether it's trying to build more muscle or get shredded. It's always like they want instant gratification. But again, the good coaches know more or less, like, it's like, especially natural bodybuilding, if you're competing on a natural level, that it's a huge, huge time component. That's what it's all about. Like, you look at a lot of the top coaches, they're giving their athletes plenty of time to set things up, whether it's like what we're talking about today, like, hey, give us enough time in the off season to get you situated for a prep, or you're actually, when you are running the prep, they're having these longer timelines now. And the athletes that, they're in the winner's circle, you can tell that they did things conservatively and correctly, and they're not rushing things along. And also too, I think about an athlete, like, when I get them, okay, if we're going to compete in a year's time, that setup is so important. That off-season setup, the prep is important, because when the season's over, when your shows are over, we've talked about this before in other podcasts, we're thinking about what happens after the show. Not just, hey, we want to get these people to gain weight, but just overall well-being, like, from a physical standpoint, mental and emotional standpoint. Want this person to be able to continue their path. Like, hey, we want to do this contest prep thing again in 2 or 3 years or 4 years down the road. We don't want to make it so terrible. Like, this whole year process we set this person up with, if it's just so terrible that we just not only create not a very enjoyable process, but just, with their overall well-being, we don't want to create any bad habits or tendencies or any issues or disorders down the road. So I think a good coach will take all that all that perspective and think about this athlete's overall well-being from the big picture standpoint, from a longevity standpoint. And that's something that I know we all have preached countless times here on the podcast. But I think that's super, super important.
Yeah, especially if you got like an athlete that is not only blessed, like, if I got one of you guys coming to me for your very first competition prep, and I saw your guys' potential, that would be really foremost in my mind. Let's not wreck this person, knowing full well that they are probably going to win their pro card on their first try, knowing full well that these people are going to go a long way in our industry. That would be really important into my mind, knowing, and not only you guys physically, but, we get to know our athletes fairly well. And sometimes you really care about these people, and you do think, okay, it's not in the cards.
Brad, I don't think it's sometimes. I think we care all the time, especially sometimes, like, when, sometimes, let's be honest, not every athlete is going to gel with us. There's always some that just doesn't gel. And those are the ones that hurt us the most. Like, man, what could I have done better? So I think we do care about all of them pretty equally.
Yeah, for sure. They're like an extension of our family. And so we do tend to think long term. You know what I mean? Let's check the box off the list. We got on stage. We looked good. We looked, we want to look better, but we didn't destroy the whole, mindset, desire of the person, the athlete, to do it again. I think about that a lot.
The patience factor too. Like, I was just thinking right now, I don't know if this is part of what we're talking about, but, like, when I look at Berto, like, look when you first competed, 2006 was your first year?
6, yeah.
7, but
2007. Yeah. So here it is, 2020, 13 years later, and he's not even in his prime yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then look at you, Brad. You've been competing since what year?
2003.
And if you were still competing, you would probably still just now maybe hitting your prime, like me. Like, to me, I've, like, hit my prime in my late 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And you can look at across the board in natural bodybuilding. Like, you see guys in their 40s and even into their 50s that are still improving and at the top of their game. So, I tend to look from that perspective too. Like, okay, yeah, I want this athlete. I'm going to definitely set this person up a year in advance for a show. But again, there's so much potential for people to make progress and enjoy the sport for years to come. So
Mm-hmm.
not everything has to happen in this short window. Like, not only are we talking about setting people up for, let's say, next year as far as a contest prep, but we're actually setting people up for the long
Their
haul. Like, hey,
career.
you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you're still gonna be doing this. And the tools that I want to teach people now is like it helps them now, but it's gonna help them for years to come. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's something that not a lot of coaches, I think, consider. Because I would say a lot of people are into I got to get my athlete winning a pro card, or I got to get this person just absolutely just peeled to the bone. And they don't really think about kind of what can happen, from taking such a harsh approach to the sport. So how's that going to impact a person, as far as like post show? Or are they going to keep enjoying this next year and the year after that? So those are the things that I tend to think about a lot that I might have not have thought about, let's say 10 years ago when I first started coaching. And that just comes with just being involved in the sport for so long and coaching so many people and being around you guys with all the experiences you guys have shared as well.
Yeah, I guess that 1 year out is a lot of it's like, hey, slow your roll, buddy. Like
Mm-hmm.
let's look at the situation now that you perhaps want to be a competitive bodybuilder. And a lot of us who do this, yeah, you're right, Jeff. We go on and do it for more than like that one season. Usually it's something that we do for quite a long time. So we need to protect that. And I guess we're setting ourselves up for not just that prep, but the entirety of their whole career. It's the first step anyways, an important step for sure.
Yeah, because I think we've done a podcast on this. I think maybe Andrea can confirm this, where I think it's like either a 2 year or a 5 year journey, where we kind of
Mm-hmm.
talked about a 5 year, like, okay, we need to do these things, go through an off season, go through a contest season, then have the recovery, then go back to the off season, and then kind of just repeat that cycle a few times, and the W. So basically, yeah, we're having this process where after a couple cycles, of doing this, and no, I'm not talking about that cycle. I know we're gonna get those comments. No, not that cycle. But but we go through the process a couple of times. Like a lot of times our athletes like, hey Jeff, hey, thanks for the help, but I got this. I got this now. And as a coach, that's what you want. Like, okay, you've taken through the process a couple of times. They've learned about themselves. They've learned about training. They learned how to diet. They learn how to transition out of the prep and so on and so on, that they're on their own. And that sets the trajectory up for the 10 to 20 years I'm talking about. So, and if you look at athletes that are doing things and very aggressively, like the hard bulks, hard cuts, they're always fixing shit after they do it. It's like, okay, I had a
Mm-hmm.
hard bulk. Now I got to fix that shit. And then they do a hard cut. Well, now I got to fix that shit. So they're constantly in this vicious cycle. So that's why I said, like, I'm just going to keep hounding it home and stressing it that you got to give us time to get to know you, and for those people to get to know us in order to be successful as a team. And that to me is like super, super important.
See, once you prep, I feel like it exposes all the things that you're doing wrong in your system, you know? So whatever it might be, yeah, it's going to really show. So I think for the recreational lifter, doesn't matter too much. But if you're going to prep, if your training is terrible, yeah, you're going to notice that by the end of your prep because it looks totally different from what you were doing in the off season. It's just that you were able to handle that at that point because you were eating plenty and had a lot more fat on you. Same thing with your eating habits. If they're not where they need to be, well, that contest prep is it's gonna feel like you're walking through the desert at times. So yeah, a year out is really where, for a lot of people, like what ends up happening, honestly, it's like we start to look at what they're doing about a year out because that's the direction we're heading in. And then we find out that, holy crap, I was not as ready as I thought. So, for example, we put them on a gaining phase, like or a proper training program. And it's the first time they ever run one of those, and they're like, you know what? Never mind that prep thing. I am having a fantastic time right now with all these gains. We can put that off for just a little bit longer. I actually have a young lady like that right now, where it's exactly what happened. She just fell in love with her training to the point where she's like, I can't believe like these last 2 months I've done this, and that, you know? So prep, as of right now, we're not even talking about it no more. We've kind of switched gears on that. So yeah. That's often, that's to me is one of, I take pride in that because the contest prep is so much faster. You get the pretty pictures at the end. You know, you get to see changes week to week, and to have an athlete be convinced that, you know what, this is probably the most appropriate thing right now. It's like, I'm not going to take my coin out of this investment period yet. I'm going to let it sit there just a little bit longer because we've altered a few things, and now I'm really, getting some good returns. That to me is one of my favorite things about that 1 year out mark, where you make the athlete, I guess, realize in a good way that, you know what, you're not as prepared or you're not as ready for this as you thought, but this is actually better in a way because you skipped a step, and now we're going back and we're fixing that.